cheering up Wes with the news that the Tories' internal polling, because they had a very bad election at the general election in London. For the first time ever, you had a Tory government elected without having a majority of Tory MPs in London. And if the rest of the country had voted like London, where we had a 2% lead and we had a lead in MPs, they'd still be Labour government. And in response to this, they did some polling and did a question, if there was a mayoral election, this was included, between Boris Johnson and Ken Livingstone, how would you vote? And there was already a 10% lead. So I don't think we should work ourselves under pressure. We did very well in this city, because in this city, the perception of the Labour Party isn't just based on what government is doing, it's based on what we did at City Hall over 8 years, rebuilding the bus service, rolling out police to every neighbourhood, abolishing fares for kids on the bus under 18, and right the way across, a record of real achievement by borough councils. Now, we didn't just lose to Boris in 2008, we lost here in Camden 2 years earlier, in 2006. After 36 years, I think it was, of an incredibly good record. And I sat there in that seat when I was housing chair in this borough in 1978, and after a long programme of commitment to public sector housing, we were letting 2,000 new homes a year. The best record in London, because this whole Labour group, left and right, was committed to public housing. And we were in a position where people, that when they got to the top of the waiting list, were offered a choice of 6 new properties. We had a whole range of support across the budget. We believe in providing good housing for those who can't afford to buy. And one of the things that I think, after the war in Iraq, the thing that makes me most angry about the last 13 years, we didn't build council housing. When the BNP got their toehold in Barking, it was by exploiting the fact that sons and daughters of people who lived in Barking and Dagenham all their lives couldn't get any housing because it wasn't being built. And there was never a Labour Party conference that decided we shouldn't build council housing. There was never a meeting of the PLP that decided we shouldn't build council housing. Never a meeting of the NEC. And the one thing, whoever is elected as Labour leader, we have to ensure that never again do we have a leader who is the master of the party, who imposes policies without consultation. We want a leader who will be part of consensus, where we build an alliance between progressive forces way beyond the Labour Party and our trade unions and Labour councils about what we need to do. I think we lost in this borough because tenants were faced with a choice about how to spend that £280 million to improve their housing. But they were refused the right to remain council tenants. And they voted 80% in this borough to be council tenants. And then they were told by this Labour government that they couldn't have the £283 million because they hadn't voted to opt out of council housing. Is that listening? Is that what's new about that? What's progressive about that? And I think that was why we lost. Because people say, how can this be a government that's looking after ordinary people? When it's holding a gun at council tenants' head and saying if you don't vote to opt out of municipal control, you can't improve your property. And I say this because it's why I'm more angry about it now, because of the news it has come out. And thank God tenants in this borough didn't know back in May, when they were being brought out by activists to vote and bring back a local council, that in the last year, before he stood down from Parliament, Tony Blair emptied his second homes allowance to fully modernise and decorate and repair his home in Trindon to increase its value. That's the sort of double standard and hypocrisy that led to our defeat. Not just on housing, but on trade union laws. It's no good saying we want to increase the minimum wage. One of the best ways of increasing wages is to take the shackles off trade unions and allow them to fight to defend their members against bad employers who actually grind them into the dirt. And how could we go through 13 years and not remove any of those restrictions? And then, of course, this debate was really what the leadership candidates were saying. How do we reconnect? We lost 5 million votes. Overwhelmingly, we lost the votes of the working class because New Labour took them for granted. They assumed they'd always vote because they had nowhere else to go. In the end, a lot of them just refused to vote for us. And therefore, I think whoever runs as our candidate for mayor, the alliance they'll have to have with the next Labour leader has got to be based on being honest. We forgot our core support. We were too concerned with what the Daily Mail would say. Well, some damn focus group was telling us that somebody in the city wanted. We forgot to deliver for not just the middle class, but we forgot to deliver for the working class as well. And until we can put together a package of policies based on actually investing in public services, investing in infrastructure, and being prepared to represent the poorest in society, then we won't get our way back to power. I intend, if I'm elected as your candidate, to spend the next 2 years fighting with Labour councils and trade unions against what this government is doing, fighting against these cuts, and turning that election into a referendum that says no more. Because everyone assumes the Tory government won't change its mind because they only remember Thatcher. But of course she was inflexible, she was completely barking mad, Michelle. But don't forget, Edward Heath's government fell apart when the economic policies fell apart and he was driven out of office. And as we go back into recession next year, and as the deficit mounts because people are being thrown out of work and their tax revenues aren't coming in, there's going to be panic, and between that Lib Dem and Tory coalition, there's a chance for us to drive a stake through it. I don't want to wait 4 or 5 years to get them out, because just as with Thatcher, the people whose lives she destroyed, most of them never put them back together again. And we can't afford to wait 4 or 5 years promising we'll do our best to restore it. We must do everything possible to bring them down now. That's why I'm proud to say, in contrast to what Una has on her website, yeah, I learned a lot in the 1980s, and I'll bring it to bear in fighting this government as well. Yep.